Every morning, tea workers go up into the mountains to the ancient tea gardens to gather the fresh tea. The fresh baked buds and twigs are weighed. Afterwards, the fresh leaves are evenly spread over the mesh screen. Here, the leaves wilt and moisture evaporates. After a few hours, the leaves are fed through a cylinder and tumbled for a few minutes to kill some enzymes in the leaves. The semi-dried leaves are then placed on a spiral roof plate that gently rotates over the leaves for a few minutes, causing them to roll and curl. After the leaves are rolled and curled, they are very moist and have a tendency to cling together. To stop this from happening, workers are constantly mixing them and keeping them apart. After the tea has been sifted and the tea leaves are now curled and ready to dry. The most important part of the process comes up next, and this is the sun drying process. In order to get the best tea leaves, the leaves must be spread out in good sunlight in order to be dried. The last and final step of this process is hand grading each of the leaves and buds. The hand grading is done on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being a young bud and 10 being the older leaves. Tea making can't be done by machines, therefore workers have to do all the work by hand. Because of this, we will see many of the Chinese workers having the upper hand in factories that produce tea. The Chinese tea itself had a significant impact on the world and on the world's economy. Chinese tea, even today, with the global market steadily decreasing, is holding up strong. The Opium War was essentially a result of the Chinese tea and its uniqueness of production, as well as the growing demand for the tea throughout the world.
The British East India Company was eager to trade with China, so England sent a special envoy to the Forbidden City to negotiate a treaty with the Emperor to allow British traders free access to China. But the Emperor Qinlong refused to meet with the British representative, Lord Macartney, and sent a note refusing his request. British demand for Chinese goods, porcelain, silk, and tea increased, but the British were reluctant to trade silver for these goods. Finally, Britain found a commodity to trade with China without depleting her own resources: opium, imported from India. When Chinese authorities tried to stop the opium trade, the British sent in their gunboats. A war ensued, and 20 years later, the Treaty of Tianjin in 1858 turned over China's ports and all of her international trade to Western control.
Many riots across China ensued due to the opium. These riots were known as Boxer riots. Also, the opium addiction claimed about 60 million Chinese lives. The idea of open trade policy came about from an American Secretary of State by the name of John Hay. This policy would help U.S. businesses along by allowing China to trade tea with the U.S. as well. American businesses soon began to benefit from the trade with the Chinese tea. In the 300 years between Columbus's voyages and the Industrial Revolution, 3 kinds of transcontinental trade boomed. The third and the only kind to last well into the Industrial Age was a boom in what have been called the drug foods: coffee, tea, sugar, chocolate, tobacco, and later opium.
Are you man enough for all this?
Most of these mildly addictive little luxuries went to Europe, and most became cheap enough for the masses because regardless of where they originated, they began to be grown on vast new world.
Antioxidant! Viscous! It's kinda sweet! Darjeeling! A taste of Asia!
Plantations combining plentiful, cheap land and cheap slave labor. Only tea production never shifted to the New World, remaining an Asian peasant crop that eluded
Slurp? It's rude! Enjoy the flavor. I like to smell it first!
direct Western control for 400 years. What made tea so important and so different from its drug food cousins? Tea was known in China at last as far back as 600 AD, spread over to Japan and Korea not long afterwards. The earliest exporters of the new beverage were the Buddhist monks who went to Chinese temples seeking enlightenment and brought back the simulations too. The drink was not cheap and never won universal acceptance, even in China. Poor people in the north generally drank boiled water instead. The drink also became widely associated with Chinese civilization, hospitality, and discussions among the cultural elite, and so acquired prestige that made it valuable export to the rest of the East, Southeast, and Central Asia. But in part because of tea's strategic function, its cultivation spread far more slowly than its use. It was a crime to take tea plants out of China, and until the mid-19th century, that country remained the source of the world's, for most of the world's production.
Rip it! Dip it! Sip it! Personally, I prefer a lager to a pilsner instead of just plain draft. I would have... Tea!